So how's everybody doing this week? Jim, how are you?
Uh,
How's work?
Good. Yeah, good. If we're going to get right into it, I think the major for our discussion, the major thing on my mind is that I was kind of just disappointed the way the movement for a People's Party is going. So I
Oh yeah,
got
what happened? Were you in on the meeting on Thursday
yeah,
night?
I got in on that call, and I really wish, I think it was you, Daisy, that brought up that when Nick Brana was on Kim Iverson.
Hmm.
And she basically said, don't get all moralistic, stick to like the Constitution and things along those lines, right? And I'm just afraid, like, when I get on the call, it just seems like, um, uh, you know, Bernie hippies or something. That's the way the country is going to see it, right?
Yeah.
And when I look at the posts on Facebook, it's about like Malcolm X and all these things that are just not going to appeal the way Tulsi was completely open arms for libertarians and independents and anti-war Republicans.
Right.
And so I definitely I keep kind of posting a little bit on the Facebook site and on Twitter, trying to tell folks that if you don't want to just be another Green Party that feels really good, right? It feels really good to be surrounded with your peers and everyone that thinks exactly like you in an extremely progressive way. That's wonderful, but it's not going to do anything.
I mean, doesn't it seem like a third party basically would have to have like 70% of the electorate supporting it? Like you'd have to have a revolutionary mass movement essentially, because the cards are everything's stacked against third parties, whether it's getting on the ballot, whether it's voter, election fraud, or whether it's just the way it's set up for the debates. It's so hard for third parties to get fair representation. You'd have to have like a mass movement where you get all these disaffected Republicans and progressives that come together and say that screw this party duopoly. We're going to come together. We're going to support this party, whatever it is. The problem is, I mean, there's like a ton of third parties out there. There's a Green Party, obviously, and there's other like more leftist parties, and then there's this movement for a People's Party, right? So like, there's so many different. And how do you get people united around one thing?
Sure. So I did like initially how the Movement for a People's Party seemed to be, along the lines of Daisy's thoughts of what we need is a coalition, more like here, these extremely central ideas that we have of being pro-peace and being anti-corruption, being election reform and election integrity, and get other people to say, stay a Green, but look at our candidates as well, right? And stay and then Moving for the People's Party actually has the guy Jerry and some other folks from Our Revolution LA that are coming on board, so they're actually all absorbing. And one of the women, I keep forgetting her name, has spent years in the Green Party and basically said, yeah, that wasn't really successful as far as the number of candidates we got elected, but we learned all that, and we have a lot of great ideas to bring forward into to the People's Party. So I was really hopeful, but I don't know. I mean, there's still a lot of time. I'm not sure who's going to carry that message to them of if Nick Brown or somebody at the very top isn't saying we need to be more than our revolution or Green Party version 2.
What about Jerry Perez? He seemed like pretty
well, he's motivating, that's for sure. I mean, I like the guys get fire, and I think that's
is
pretty
that the
cool.
Guy from Our Revolution LA?
Yeah, from Our Revolution LA. Yeah, he's got some fire and all that, but so far a lot of it, to me, has been inspirational talk. Along the lines of, "Come on, we're going to get together. We're not going to take it anymore, and we're going to burn it down and build it back up." Kind of talk, almost rhetoric. And so it's been, he's very motivating. I think I've yet to see, if his politics are falling in line with what I'm saying of, being somebody more like a Tulsi that would have the mass appeal in the center left that would, I think, actually work.
I mean, it seems like you need both. Like you need a platform, obviously, like that's really
Right.
important. But you also need a charismatic leader or leaders, and
Mm.
obviously Bernie was able to get 30,000 people into an arena, as was and is our current White House occupant.
Yeah.
And Tulsi got people excited, not to the same extent. I think that Bernie was able to do it, but I mean, obviously, you have to have both the platform, which is kind of what you're working toward, and a charismatic leader. And I really think it's got to be a positive platform. Like we're building something. We're not just like this sucks. We're trying to get rid of. We're fed up with a party duopoly. I mean, that can be part of it, but it really has
Right.
to be like we're building this new, you know, what are you going to call it? New society or new system of with more equity. I mean, obviously, it's so corrupt and it's so, I mean, you can't change it through the mainstream parties. That's become pretty obvious. So, like,
Well,
what's the
see,
answer?
but like the way that I see it is that so I listened in on that call that you sent me, Jim, that you sent the group, the
Right. You're
initial
talking about
call.
the original call.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And like one of the things, the biggest takeaway for me from that call was, first of all, I didn't find it too helpful. I just thought that it was just like a bunch of people kind of saying like, "Hey, this is what we want to do." That's it.
Right.
There was like nothing else to it.
And
But
there was I thought a lot of also, hey, if you're other Our Revolution groups out there, contact us kind of stuff. That seemed to be their push to try and get right now to get in contact with a bunch of other groups.
right, but
Yeah.
the thing that really stood out to me was the fact that Nick Brana himself, he said that they were adopting Bernie Sanders' platform. Like that was verbatim what he said
Yeah.
on the call.
Right.
And I feel like that is not the right move to make, because essentially what you're saying is that the disaffected Bernie people, they're the ones, we're forming a new group. That's essentially what they're saying,
Yeah.
and especially after 2020, maybe if you would have done that after 2016, because that Bernie 2016 was a lot different than Bernie 2020, you know, and so because Bernie 2016 was more about just being an economic populist, and his message was just very different than 2020 Bernie. And I actually
Yeah.
I pulled up the platform for him and for People's Revolution, or People's Party, and so yeah, so what I feel is necessary, and this is why I was thinking about the coalition of just you can be in whatever party you want to be in, but what
Yeah.
we need is, because what is lacking is representation. What it is that a good majority of people feel that they are not being represented in these two parties, right? And it's not so much that they want to create another party, it's more that they want their voice to be interjected into policies, and just being represented, like you were saying, just getting a third party on the debate stage, that in itself is a huge thing. That's why a lot of people were thinking that Jesse Ventura, him having that name recognition and all that, he would have a better possibility of getting on the debate stage, rather than like Howie Hawkins if he was running as the candidate for the Greens, because Howie Hawkins doesn't have that name recognition. He doesn't have, like, what incentive do they really have, especially now this year? What incentive do they really have to include anybody else besides just the Democrats and the Republicans in the
Right.
debate?
Well, they changed the rules, after Ross Perot. Ross Perot ran in 92 and 96, and they changed the rules for 96 so that he could not participate in the debates.
Well, is that the same point that the women's group stopped running the
Pretty
debate?
much, yeah. I
Basically,
think so.
yeah. I mean, I think
Women's
they
League
basically
of
would not
Voters?
allow somebody like that to come in again. I think was the idea.
Right. So it's pretty much totally controlled. So you have to have like a super I mean, you have to have a minimum, I don't know what it is, 15 or 25% in the polls in like so
15.
many different states, whatever, to even get into the debate. So like as a third party, again, unless you have kind of this mass popular movement that just rises, you know, it's, and even then they're going to do everything they can to stop you from being on the debate stage. They do not want,
Yeah.
they want, you know, they want two brands of laundry detergent. They're both made by Procter and Gamble. They don't want to have an
Yeah.
alternate choice. It's really a choice.
Well, I assume they do the same thing that they did, you know, the Dems did in the primaries, basically, you know, absolutely move the goalposts when it looks like somebody like Jesse Ventura was getting close. I mean, they definitely would do that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And it also seems like, I mean, obviously Bernie, I mean, the thing is, yeah, if you just take it hook, line, and sinker, take Bernie's platform and just put a new, you know, head on it, right? What's to say that that person's not going to do the same thing Bernie did in 4 years, right? Because, I mean, one thing that attracted people to Tulsi was that Tulsi, she was a contrast to Bernie in that, I mean, she supported Bernie in 2016, obviously, but Bernie, like you said, Daisy, he was different 2016. But Tulsi was advocating for, she was focusing on the war machine and foreign policy, and she was also focusing on freedom issues like Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and Snowden. And that's something that Bernie, you know, obviously didn't seem very comfortable or barely touched at all, or was just complicit, you know, with like, would criticize Maduro, but would not say anything really about critical of what the U.S. was doing in Venezuela. I mean, that coup attempt recently was outrageous. And where, I mean, and Tulsi's guilty of this too, but where are the voices saying this is crazy? You know, but obviously that's not an issue that most people, like you the three of us are aware of it because we're news junkies, but like, just to give you an example, okay? I'll say, I won't say exactly who, but this is a relative in my family, okay? She saw someone on TV, okay? And she goes, oh, isn't that the guy Steven likes for president? And it was Amy Klobuchar. And she thought Amy Klobuchar was the guy I like. So that's like, that's the level of political sophistication that we have in this country. It's like, well, she's a woman. It must be the guy he likes. I mean, it must be the woman. It must be the candidate that he likes, right? And I was like, okay. So,
yeah,
all
because
those
Tulsi
issues
and Amy Klobuchar, like, how do you confuse the two? No way.
I don't know, but they did. I think a lot of people do. I mean, a lot of people, they just don't, you know, they're
well, remember, I forgot what channel it was on that they put a picture of Kirsten Gillibrand instead of Tulsi.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and they put some John Yang or something.
John Yang.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because you know, Kirsten Gillibrand looks exactly like Tulsi Gabbard. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, pretty much. You know.
Yeah. So
and they have the same policies.
I did want to say, Daisy, that there was some discussion on one of the calls that gave me the idea that the platform essentially starts as you know, as Bernie's platform, but it's open for change, you know, at the convention and so forth, whether it's an actual physical convention or a virtual one.
So I pulled up their platform.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And again, I saw this too. They have a whole platform like listed on their webpage, even though I'm sure I heard something on the call that was like, well, you know, obviously that'll be up for discussion kind of thing. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But like what I'm reading here, again, it is very on the like social justice-y type of, you know, line. Okay, so an economy that works for everyone, right? So an economic bill of rights, strong unions and workplace democracy, modernize our infrastructure, fair tax code and thriving small business, in Wall Street. I don't know what that means. Oh, rein in. My bad. And create public banks, fair trade. All right, so that sounds okay. So abolish corruption and restore democracy, secure and transparent elections, defend civil liberties. Well, that's good. All right, Medicare for all, free public college and quality education, comprehensive immigration reform, respect disability rights.
So now those things are all things that that I agree with, and Medicare for all can be a harder sell. You have to prove to people, libertarians and so forth, that just makes sense. You have to prove those numbers. But everything else are things that I think are general, they're not so moralistic in nature, right?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're getting
All
there.
right. Protect the environment and defend biodiversity. So clean energy and environmental protection, animal welfare, sustainable agriculture, stand for equality and justice, restorative justice, racial justice, equal rights for women, LGBTQIA equality, honor indigenous rights. And then last, very but not
Yeah.
least, create a peaceful global community benefiting from technology. A collaborative and peaceful global community, promise and peril of accelerating technology, take care of veterans. So the issue that I saw with that is the fact that
Right.
the Republicans and libertarians or people that find themselves more on the right, to them this is just more government, more interjection of bureaucracy, which to a certain extent I agree that we should not be so regulatory on everything,
Mhm.
like we and the libertarians, you're never going to get them on any of this stuff, because for them they
Right.
want no government. You know what
That's
I'm
right.
saying? Like, I'm not
Right.
saying that you can't have any sort of oversight, but all of these things, it just sounds like the government is going to interject. Like, this is what they're going to hear. The government is going to interject in every single aspect of your life.
So unfortunately, you do kind of have to make a decision about whether the basic idea of role of government, whether libertarianism is something you're going to embrace, or if you're simply going to say that government does have a big role, does play a big role in society, and we embrace that. That
Well,
probably is a basic value you've got to decide on, right? For a party.
all these billionaire libertarians, they're libertarians until they need help or they think
Yeah,
they need
right.
help. I mean, I just read that article. I forget who it was by. A really good article in the New Yorker a couple weeks ago that was
Yeah.
talking about Greenwich, Connecticut, how it went from and had like one of the highest per capita billionaires of any city, and you had the like in the 50s, you had Prescott Bush was like in the country club and was involved with the city council, but there was a sense back then, even among the Republicans, of social obligation that you had to like do something for the community or whatever, and that changed, and now it's gone from like the Bush family to Trump. And how did that happen over 4 years? And that these billionaires now support Trump, and they're like, they're willing to overlook all of the racism and the misogyny and corruption of Trump because he's cut taxes for them, right? And
Right.
and it's in the name of well, I earned it, I get to keep it. But then as soon as like the pandemic hits and they start losing money, then they want a bailout from the government, and they get it, from both parties. So like, what we have now, we do have strong government that's basically bought and paid for by the extremely wealthy and powerful, so that they will get taken care of if something happens. So de facto, we already have this strong government. The problem is it's working for the wrong people.
But true libertarians don't agree with all the bailouts, right, and stuff.
Right, but I'm just talking about the people like the Ayn Rand types, who are the billionaires who think that they made all their money on hedge funds, through their own sweat and hard work. Right. I mean, there are some people out there who are off the grid, who are totally, libertarians, whatever. More power to them. But I'm just talking.
No, but you have even people like Ron Paul. Ron Paul doesn't agree with any of this stuff. He does call it like corporate socialism. He calls it for what it is. He doesn't agree with any of these things, and he's one of these people. What I'm saying is that, like, if you look at how Tulsi was able to kind of build that bridge, and she was able to get the support of people like Ron Paul, even though they don't agree on economics. You know, they don't agree on everything. That is what I'm talking. But the fact that she is someone who, she doesn't agree with this broad overreach of government on everything. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is where we can come together. But what I saw in this platform is it's just a lot of leftism, you know, and that's how it's going to be seen. But and we're supposed to, if we're supposed to be offering something that can represent the majority of people, all of these independents and stuff, they don't all lean to the left. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like what this group is doing is that they're only catering to these progressive leftists. That's it. That's the only. And progressivism is not just a left ideal. You
can I insert my Moscow minute here now?
Go ahead.
Oh boy.
You know, so I'm not holding up Lenin as a positive example at all. But you know, you have to simplify things, and that program is really interesting for us to look at. But it's like so many different levels and so many.
I'm sorry. What was the program? What program are you talking about?
The platform of the Movement for People's Party.
It's
got so much stuff there. And you know, Lenin went around in 1918 and said, you know, peace, land, and bread, which is very simplified, but people identified with that. So if you know, and we talked about this I think before, but simplify it to your top three issues, you know, which you know, corruption, but maybe say election integrity,
and anti-war. I mean, it's those three things to me. And anti-corruption, anti-war, and clean elections. You know, and paper ballots, clean elections. I mean, I think that's something. If you clean up government first,
and the wealth disparity too,
fix government, and then let the people decide what they want for after that. But first, things are so broken. I'm sorry, I'm stomping all over you, Steve. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
I couldn't help it.
And also this idea that there's this myth that, you know, rampant capitalism is just going to manage itself, that kind of the invisible hand and the free market solves everything. And that's really just an extension of neoliberal economics, you know, because obviously what happens is people, they manipulate the system, they manipulate the tax code, they manipulate so they're able to, and this started in like the late 80s with like Michael Milken at Yale, who said, you know, all these stock investors were making, like, the really good ones are making like $10 million a year. And Michael Milken figured out, you know, you can actually make $200 million a year if you can figure out how to game the system. And that's what these people are doing. And they're not really, they're getting paid way more out of proportion of what they're actually contributing to society, if anything. And so that's, I mean, the economics of it, you look at the way the tax code has gone, the top 0.01%, it has gone from like, you know, 60 or 70% tax rate to like 18%, which is lower than what you and I pay on our taxes. And there's something wrong with that picture when you have no, your infrastructure is falling apart, you have no, you know, basic medical care, you have these basic post-secondary education. I mean, these are basic things you need to build a strong society. And we don't have those because we can't frickin' afford them, but we have enough money to bomb, you know, poor countries. Like, what's wrong with this picture? I mean, I think that's one of the, I would say the corruption, you can kind of group together the election integrity and whatever, you know, I think, but I think you have to talk about the wealth disparity too. I think people, I mean, do you agree with that, Daisy? Do you think people on the right would think that's a problem when they see, like, I mean, we're not talking about the top 1%, we're talking about the top 0.001%. I mean, it's like, you know, the top 500 people who own like the lion's share of the wealth in this country.
I definitely think that wealth disparity is something that is important to, you know, everybody, generally speaking. But I think it's, again, when you have that government hand, like the reason why, we have these tax breaks and all that for all these people is because they have legalized all these things. This is the government implementing, they're the ones picking the winners and losers in
But
this
who do they
situation.
work for? They get paid by the lobbyists. I mean, they bailed out the
For sure,
lobbyists.
for sure. But again, that goes back to the corruption, right? It goes back to who are they getting their money from? What we don't want to do is create more of a welfare state. Anytime that you start talking about income disparity, then that's when you start going into, okay, so how do you equalize it? You know what I'm saying? What are you going to do? You're going to give people money. Oh, then people are going to just be living off the state. That's always the argument that you're going to get. So I mean, and proof is in the pudding with all this stuff that's going on with the virus, and all this the lockdown or whatever. The fact that you have these big box stores that are allowed to stay open, and then you have mom and pop shops that are closing. Everyone, like a good chunk of people, are going to lose their business. That's really sad. That's really, really sad. And then what is their alternative? You're going to have, I already talked about this in one of the last calls about how, the real estate market, about how now there's all these people that they're dumping all of these buildings. Why? Because their tenants, they can't pay, so they're going to evict them all. At the end of, whenever this moratorium on evictions and all that goes away, and then it's gonna be like a fire sale prices for all of these buildings, and included in that are people who have businesses, these small businesses that they lease, their building. And what are they going to do? They have no money to pay for anything. They can't get any sort of relief, because all of this money keeps going to all of these huge stores. And again, it's because they are forced to close while you have these big box stores. How are you going to tell me what is the difference between like the little mom and pop hardware store and Home Depot?
Right.
What is the difference?
Yeah. I know. I mean, you can practice distancing and wearing masks in either environment. So what's the problem?
Exactly.
And the degree to which the government is completely oblivious or just doesn't care is, again, shocking. In things like, you've got all these people in the middle of a pandemic that have, their job has been tied to their health care because of the Affordable Care Act, which was, of course, was just a big protection for the guarantee that the insurance companies continue to make money.
Exactly.
And so they don't have any health care. So what is the government? I mean, both Hillary and Biden, everybody's saying, we'll open up the Obamacare exchanges and let people get COBRA and all that. Well, you still have to purchase. That's still insurance. And that insurance still has copays and deductibles. That means you might not get health care, and it still might not cover the conditions you need get covered.
I mean, who does the government work for? I mean, like Biden said to his donors, he said nothing is going to fundamentally change. Like they pay lip service, and like for every crumb they give you and me, it's like they give, a big fat bailout to their supporters, people who pay for them to be in power. I mean, how do people get rich in politics? Like, you don't get rich on your salary, but people get rich because they go through a revolving door, or worse, they're totally corrupt on the take or whatever. But I mean, the system is so broken that even somebody like AOC, who may be like well-intentioned and go in there and try to change things, within a year they whipped her into shape, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's like, it's pretty, I don't think we should give up working through the system, but sometimes I think you need a mass movement of people getting really fed up, and Sagar, and Jetty talked about that on the Hill. And it's kind of, we joke about it, my wife and I, every time we hear him talk about, the big populist uprising that's coming. But in a way, I think he's onto something, because I think people, when things get really bad, and they're not really bad yet, but they're going to be really bad when people realize they really have lost their business. They really have lost, they can't educate their kids. They can't even feed their kids. They can't take care of basic needs. When people have nothing else to lose, then then they're ready for action. And you need somebody, a rabble rouser, to lead them, and
Right.
it can go either way.
But I mean, I'm sorry, be devil's advocate or too negative here, but I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Everyone should know that the mass media has been lying to them for years over to create wars about Russiagate, the Afghanistan papers, which people won't even know about, the OPCW stuff, which most people won't even know about. I mean, I don't know at what point people are going to stop listening to Fox and CNN and MSNBC and all in mass turn on Jimmy Dore. I don't know when that happens, if it isn't happening right now, so.
Well, I mean, even with everything that's going on right now, look at what the narrative is amongst the protests that are going on, or people that the small business owners that are actually trying to open up their business because again, they can't get relief. Like, if I'm not mistaken, it was in Michigan that there was a barber, that this 70-something-year-old barber who he applied for the small business loan, he applied for unemployment, he got rejected for both, and so he was like, well, what's my ulterior motive? Well, I have to open up, I have to make money somehow,
Yeah.
because you got to eat, right? And so he went and he opened up his business. And there was this militia of people who with guns who showed up, and they were blocking the police from coming and arresting him.
Oh, right.
And it ended up being this whole big thing where eventually I think the attorney general of Michigan went and closed them down. They went in with all of these SWAT people or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, and some other people are getting $10,000 fines on their business. People are just trying to make a living. You're not giving them another option.
There was that woman hairdresser too, right? That she's basically, I need to feed my kids, and she went and she got arrested and was going to be put in jail and all this stuff, and just crazy.
Well, she served her 7 days because.
Oh, that's right.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it was one of her Congress people actually went, and they offered to serve the time for her, and she said, no, I am going to serve this time because I'm going to prove the point that this is wrong for the government to be doing this to us.
The government, the powers that be, they are fucking scared of civil disobedience, because they want to make an example of anyone who does something like that, because that really could mess up their whole plan. So if you start having the barber in Michigan, and you have another, somebody in another state, and then it's all of a sudden it becomes a movement, and people are like, wait a second, Home Depot's open, but I can't open my hardware store and let in 3 people at a time. What are you talking about?
Right.
And I think that's the kind of thing you could see that just emerge. I mean, you could see something like that happen. I think they're making examples of people because they know that is, and I sound conspiratorial here, but I mean, I just think, they're the people, you look at what was it, Lori Loughlin is getting for the one who paid for her kids' tests, the SAT thing, and she's getting,
she's
getting 2 months or something. She could have gotten 40 years, but she's getting 2 months, and she'll probably serve it at home because she can't go into a prison, But if the woman who lied about where she lived so her kid could get into a better school got sentenced to 4 or 5 years in prison. I mean, just the disparity of the consequences for illegal behavior depending on class is just, I mean, it's so outrageous.
Right. But again, getting back to the media narrative, think about how is it being spun to the people, right? If you look on CNN or MSNBC or even on Fox and all these places, it's about, oh, these people are Trump supporters, or these people, they have no regard for your life. For them, it's about, oh, I need a haircut versus my life and all this kind of. It's setting up this dichotomy so that it's this whole thing of pitting people against each other, so that the people won't come together and realize the power that they have once they come together and say enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who watches CNN? It's like and MSNBC and Fox. It's mostly people 40 and above, right? I mean, I don't think young people are watching that stuff.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
even
I
if
think
you
so.
go on like YouTube and stuff, you're
Yeah.
finding that a lot, like when you know, on your feed or whatever, what is it that gets you know, what do you call this?
Prioritized.
Played. Yeah, what is it that gets prioritized in your feed? It's all this stuff. Even if you go on like Facebook and stuff, it's the same. I see all this stuff for MSNBC, CNN, and it's like,
Yeah.
what the hell? I never click on any of these things. Why is this being offered to me?
Okay, so it's time for Conspiracy Minute.
Oh, okay.
I know Daisy loves when I talk about H.A. Goodman, and I get
Go ahead.
I get a big kick out of him. So he actually played up, so everyone knows like this whole background how Biden was in the bunker.
Wait,
in the
who's H.A. Goodman? Just fill me in and the rest of us.
So he's a YouTube guy that his big thing has been that since 2016 he actually had
Hillary, lock her up.
Yeah, but 2016 he's basically been saying Hillary will be the nominee in 2020. They're going to find a way to. She's going to find a way to make that happen. He theorizes that Bloomberg didn't spend all that money to get himself nominated. That was all about screwing up everybody else to, create a lane for her somehow, or like that. But he says in this latest thing, right, when Biden was in the bunker on with Charlemagne, right?
Oh my
and he
God!
said,
Yeah.
and he ended up saying like, well, if you're not going to vote for me, you ain't black, right?
If you don't know,
H.A. Goodman says if you watch
Trump, then you ain't black. That's
right? Yeah. That's right. H.A. Goodman says if you watch, he's actually essentially reading that off like a cue card or a teleprompter. So that was planned again for him to commit, campaign suicide, and because obviously it's crazy that this guy's completely senile is going to be the nominee, right? So that if that's another way to actually, the whole conspiracy is it's all about having Hillary at the convention or whatever just be placed in as the candidate without ever having all that media exposure that in past years always dry. The more people see her, the more people dislike her, and the numbers go down, right? So that's my conspiracy minute. Is I think that's really interesting, and whether or not he's been right about how it's playing out the whole time, it could turn out to be true, actually.
Well, he has not been correct. He has been
in a lot of things,
like a lot of his facts, but what he's been talking about because he said that they were going to press charges against her and all this kind of stuff by now that she would have been, in prison, and obviously she's not. Right.
No, he's guilty pleasure. I find him to be entertaining with his conspiracy stuff, but but I believe that the Democrats, they can't really be trying to go with Biden unless the idea is to have another Robert Mueller, who's obviously not really in charge of the investigation. It was really Weissman, right? Who was in it, and he was just a figurehead. They want a figurehead that does absolutely nothing, and it can be run by everybody else, right? The deep state.
But that's why this is like the first time that the vice presidential choice is actually going to be important. Mm-hmm. Whoever it is that, and that's why this whole thing about Amy Klobuchar actually being vetted for this stuff right now. What does she have to offer? I don't even understand.
She doesn't terrify as much as I think of like Warren or Kamala Harris as being really authoritarian. They would do what they want to do if they got power. They frighten me. Klobuchar, I don't see her being quite so dangerous, but she could be probably manipulated as well,
But she's got such great jokes,
She's got the office supplies like the stapler, so those can be dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah. Ask that worker of hers how dangerous she is with the stapler.
Yeah, so that could be interesting if she actually does show some temper once she is, president.
So what do you think?
The thing is that having her as president, I don't even know what would happen, because that's the thing, that he's not going to be the president in actuality, and he's even said it, that whoever he chooses needs to be ready to be the president. right away.
Has he actually stated that he would not be more than one term? I mean, it's basically known, right? It's known that even if he got in, at best he would serve one term, and you're right. Even then, he would be I think he'd be a figurehead at the best, you know.
Well, they seem to be. I mean, let's change direction a little bit, but the whole Tara Reade thing. There were a couple of hit pieces against her. There was one in Politico on last Friday, and also on I guess on NPR, I believe. And then there's also another story today about her lying and about her educational credentials and everything.
Yeah, Michael Tracy's been loving that.
Michael Tracy, right? Michael Tracy's kind of like I couldn't even watch the whole. I just watched that.
Yeah, but I did watch it. I try to be. I want to get all perspective. As as Crystal Ball and Sager pointed out, okay, I think her lawyer actually left her. Basically, Tara Reade's lawyer left her, right?
The first lawyer.
Because of how. No, I think they're very just yesterday. I think yeah. But because of how it looks, right? Because the way the media is going to play it, that she was not completely truthful with her education. Well, Biden lied and said he had 3 degrees at one point, and one of the times he had to drop out of a presidential race. Right. He claimed to have 3 degrees from these 3 different colleges, and it was all BS.
Well,
and I
thought that there was some sort of issue because her lawyer is a Trump supporter and actually gave money to the Trump campaign.
Yeah, not this cycle, and he also did give money also to. Like Jayapal or something or something. So he's, but again, it's one of those things that they focus like a laser beam on this thing when she's being re-victimized by all this stuff,
right?
Because they don't even mention the thing that where Biden was worse and the same critique about not being 100% truthful about your education. They won't even mention that.
Right. Well, that's the real story. The real story is that they're defaming her character, so that Joe Biden is more electable. That's the whole story. I mean, she's just a pawn in this thing, unfortunately. But they just want to make. So obviously, they still think Biden is going to be possibly the candidate in November. So that's or at least they want him to last until the convention. So they're just trying to knock her because she's the biggest threat to him, or what has been the biggest threat to him. I think.
So I mean, it's nice of the Dems to show the true color that where they want to say they believe all women and Me Too and all this stuff. They're really stuck back in the James Carville. If you drag a dollar through the trailer park, you never know what you're going to find. That's really where they are when it comes down to it. When one of their candidates is threatened, that's really where it comes down to.
I mean, ultimately, it's really sad because they've just politicized this woman's, what she's gone through, trauma, and that's saying that we believe her, right? So I'm going to go on the whole. I'm neutral. I don't believe her, and I don't not believe her. Okay, because that's the whole thing. Is that on one side of the spectrum, it's that she definitely went through this, and he's a rapist, and all this kind of stuff. When in actuality, it is still an allegation, right? It has not been proven. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that that's how it has to be looked at. It has to be looked at through the neutral lens because. That's why it's being politicized, because if you look at it it's being taken as that Katie Halper and Crystal Ball and all these people that they just put this out there and Ryan Grimm, that they put this out there because they are upset that Bernie got this thing stolen from him and they're trying to defame Biden in any way possible, right?
Yeah.
And then the other side of it is, well, then now we have to tear apart this woman's life so that we can prove that Joe Biden isn't a rapist, And it's like, her being poor, her having, even this whole education thing. So last night I watched how on the Convo Couch, Fiorella and Tina Desiree Berg, they were on there and they were talking about it. And I guess Tina Desiree Berg, she actually requested this information from Tara Reade herself. and Tara Reade sent her a copy of her, I don't know if it's her master's or her graduate degree, right?
Okay.
And she was talking about how you wouldn't be able to be accepted into a graduate program if you didn't have your undergraduate degree, because that's what's being held into question, right? Is her graduate degree.
Okay.
And
well, what's being held into question? She never actually did the paperwork that you're supposed to do. Like, she did all the coursework, but she never actually filed for the degree or something like that. So it was kind of like a clerical thing.
Oh, interesting.
Well, what they were talking about on that thing, I haven't actually looked into it. I'm just talking about what they were saying, was that in the midst of all of that is when she had to change her name and all of this paperwork because of her abuse from her husband at the time. So
yes,
there was some sort of mix up in that. Again, I don't know, but I think I just think it's like really fucked up. You know, last week we talked about the fact that, you know, they do this to every sort of victim, right? So that they can justify whatever it is that they need to justify in the media, right? It's always like, and it makes it so that whenever there is a victim of any sort of abuse or, you know, the criminal justice system or anything like that, you're never going to come out and try to seek justice. Why? Because they're going to tear your life apart.
Sure.
You know, and it's always going to be your fault. You know?
And Tara even said that they used the canard of like, well, you wouldn't have been the only one. Of course, if he did it to you, he would have done it to others. Where are the others? And she's like, what? Other people are seeing what's happening to me. They're not going to come out. That's crazy. And you mentioned the thing about the her having to change her name. They use that as a weapon against her. All these reports have said, well, she's a shady character. She changed her name and all the, you know, it's like, it's unbelievable. And you know, they know the background and they're just not giving the full story to paint her in a negative light. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really sucks because now it's getting you know, made to this whole thing where like Michael Tracy and all these people, they're seen as these misogynists and all this. So again, it's pitting us against each other when it doesn't need to be that way, you know. I mean, I do understand that to a certain extent. I do kind of feel like Michael Tracy, he's gotten to the point where he's just a contrarian on everything, it seems like, you know, like he just wants to go against
well, it's like, I mean,
mainstream.
He's got to do something with his hair. You know, I know we all have hair issues these days, but like, it's like he starts it out like saying, sorry, I got to fix my hair.
Yeah.
Well, I saw he did some sort of interview because, you know, I don't know if you've been watching him, but he does this thing where he invites people on to essentially argue against whatever, like vent out whatever it is that they feel he's wrong on or whatever. And the guy that he had on, and I felt like, first of all, he was so stuck on like semantics, like and he kept like interrupting the guy. I don't know. I didn't see it as like very conducive, but
interesting.
But at the end of it, it was just like, you know, he was asking, he was like, so, you know, what if she does have something to gain from this, right? And the guy was like, I don't understand what she would have to gain. And he said, well, I mean, everybody's praising her for being, you know, courageous. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Wow.
Like, that's an argument? Are you gotta be shitting me, man. Like, my life is getting torn apart, but because people are telling me, oh, you're so brave.
I know if you consider where the obvious contrast is with Dr. Ford, where, you know, she did get death threats, right? So she suffered for coming out with her story, but she economically could afford you know, security. Something that Reade cannot afford. And also there was like a GoFundMe that pulled together like $1 million for Dr. Ford. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's anything like that for Tara Reade. Actually, I went looking to see if there's any kind of fund for him at one point. So it's it's just strange. It's strange the way that this is all played out, and I think it's to me, it's basically showed that the Democrats are, what I think they are anyways, for the most part, the leadership anyway, not the general membership, complete hypocrites that are warmongers and that use the opportunity of the pandemic to throw money to the rich donors and just like really horrible people.
I know. Did you guys see on the Hill of the Rising that they were talking about that? I don't know who it was, but it's some sort of writer that wrote that that even if Biden was boiling babies, that they would still vote.
I didn't see that.
Yes.
It's so crazy. Like,
wait, what did they say about Biden boiling babies?
They said that she would vote even if she found out that Biden was like boiling babies. She would vote for Biden.
And if you went in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shot somebody, you'd still vote for him. I guess
it was supposed to be the comparison.
Yeah.
So hold on. I looked it up.
Yeah.
It's from The Nation. A writer from The Nation said, I would vote for Joe Biden if he boiled babies and ate them.
Right.
I just don't, I mean, it's like choosing between Hitler and Ribbentrop or something, like, well, Ribbentrop's better than Hitler, I guess, but, I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't get that.
It's freaking nuts, man. All right, so you guys ready?
Yeah.
Oh, what we got?
Ready for the
Legislative
Week in Review?
Legislative Week in Review. Okay, let's do it.
All right, so the Legislative Week in Review is in session. Okay. All right, so first we start off with this. So I thought this was interesting because of the fact that it kind of impacts people here in Massachusetts. Specifically in Andover. So the Treasury is delivering millions of economic impact payments by prepaid debit card. So they're starting this program, which I think is kind of weird that they're only doing it in two places. They're doing it in Andover and in Austin. And it's supposed to be, so essentially, hold on.
Well, that's the processing center.
What's the processing center?
Those locations are the IRS processing centers, not the only. I mean, so they accept tax returns, right? Austin and Andover are the IRS processing centers, not just the locations where they're doing the debit cards.
Oh, okay.
Based on what I just saw there, but maybe I'm wrong. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it seems like they're piloting this program, and they partnered up with Visa, of course. And essentially, what they would do is that they would put money onto these cards, and if you don't have like some sort of bank account, so that way you wouldn't have they wouldn't send out checks anymore. They would just do it through this. So I think that's kind of interesting because I feel like this is their step forward. Like this is what they're gonna do.
Another way they can track you.
Exactly. And so I went on to the frequently asked questions, of course, and essentially what they were saying was that they would not be tracking you, even though I do not see. So you see, it says. Like, would they be able to see, would the Treasury Department be able to see how I spend my economic impact payment? And it says no, but I feel like that is, it's like, no, but.
Wait, isn't the FBI part of the Treasury Department?
The FBI?
Isn't that part of the Treasury Department? So, I mean, I think they are. Know. So ultimately, the Treasury Department, if the need arose, then I think they could use it. They could see how you spent your economic.
Yeah, they could probably get a warrant or whatever like that, or just break the laws they have with the FISA courts and so forth, right? I mean,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
As long as you don't rock the boat, you'll be fine, right?
Right, and the way that they can make sure that you're not going to be using that you're only going to be using the card, and is that there's no fee that you pay to use the card for anything, but if you take out cash, well, then there's a fee, right? There's a $2 fee. So because cash they can't track, right?
Oh, interesting. So they want to penalize that a little, yeah.
Exactly.
That is
Exactly.
interesting.
So
That,
yeah, so
that
I thought
reminded me
it
of
was,
something. That reminded me of something that my wife told me about, that the government actually did pretty good regarding COVID and finances. Is basically um, flexible spending accounts like DECRA and all that kind of stuff, dependent care and all that kind of stuff. They are, because usually it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. You put so much money in there, and if you don't use it, you get penalized. They are backing off. They do realize that because people aren't using dependent care, they're making adjustments where people don't get screwed over by that. So that's a good thing, courtesy of your government, who cares about you so much.
yeah. I mean, I just like, I don't know how comfortable I feel with them, this like nanny state, of them
Oh
being able
yeah.
to just like track every single thing. And again, they're really trying to go away from cash. Even if you go to most stores nowadays, they would really prefer for you not to use cash. Why? Because the virus is on the cash. Everything is to get away from cash and to go to these cards. Which again, everything is trackable no matter what. All right. So then the other thing that I wanted to bring up to you guys is that Amy Klobuchar and hold on. So Amy Klobuchar, Ben Sasse, Cory Booker, and Tim
One second, real
Scott.
quick.
Yeah.
Just tying into what you said, Kim Iverson has a recent video up on the expansion of the surveillance state.
I just saw that. It's excellent.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
Oh,
I already
good.
watched it, but I am going to talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
I am gonna
Shout
talk
out
about
to
some
Kim
of it.
Iverson as much as we can. I think she's great.
It's only like
For
12
sure, for
minutes.
sure.
It's not too long.
All
Shorter
right.
than our podcast.
All right, sorry about that.
Okay, so they introduced this bill, which I mean, I guess this is supposed to be a good thing, and I don't really know how I feel about it, but it's a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to establish a tax credit for training services received by individuals who are unemployed as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. So, as you can see here, there is no text, there's nothing. I mean, there's
Whoa.
nothing to it. It's just been introduced, but I was able to pull this information. So it's going to be called the Skills Renewal Act, right? And it's supposed to be a flexible $4,000 skills training credit for newly unemployed Americans. Will allow workers to access their choice of training programs and gain skills expected to be in high demand in coming years. So again, it doesn't really have, like, even in this, it doesn't really talk about a lot.
Right.
It's very vague, but it does say that it would be including apprenticeships, stackable credentials, certificate programs, and additional 2 and 4 year programs. And essentially, this would just be, again, it's a tax credit, right? That
Yeah.
you would be able to put towards your 2021 expenses.
Yeah.
But
So on the face of it, that's nice. I mean, I'd prefer free state colleges, but okay.
Wait, tax credit is not a tax deduction. So tax credit means it comes right off the taxes that you owe. So if you owe $10,000 in taxes and this costs $8,000, you get to take that $8,000 off the $10,000 you owe. That's the way I understand tax, how a tax credit works, not a tax deduction. So tax credit is always better than a tax deduction.
Nice.
Yeah. And it said that it's maybe you know a little bit more about this, but it's the fact that it's like fully refundable. So it's supposed to like help. Where is it? I don't. Yeah, I can't. I don't know where I read that. But it's supposed to help people that are like super low income, or that they're not even that they're not able to do their taxes. Like, so if you don't make over a certain amount of money, that you're not really eligible to do your taxes. So even for them, they would be able to use this. So they could essentially, I guess, get $4,000 back.
Right.
So this is good, but at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know what. So we can be more educated, and but if there's no jobs, if there's nothing, like, they have to implement an infrastructure plan, and they have to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of these states, they're already struggling to keep afloat because of the fact that, people aren't working, they're not getting taxes, like all this kind of, they're not getting relief from the federal government.
Well,
and they're having to pay out these pension plans, which that is really hurting a lot of these states. So then, I mean, like, I don't really know how this is really all that great. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
there's
Well,
really nothing to do.
If Biden's going to be elected, is fracking education included or?
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for it. Like, I have been wanting to, like, learn like how to become an electrician and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm totally down for that.
Yeah. It's not a negative thing. It looks like it possibly could be something that turns out to be very helpful. But I understand what you're saying. It's like if the whole economy is shattered and there aren't good industries to be getting into, then we'll see.
Exactly. But the reason I thought that this was actually, it does have some legs to it, is because they are introducing a companion bill in the House.
Okay.
So it does seem like this does have some legs to it. It is going to go somewhere.
And does she have co-sponsors on this?
Yeah. So let's see.
Any Republican co-sponsors, or is just?
It is. It was introduced. Ben Sasse is a Republican.
Right.
So yeah, Ben Sasse, Cory Booker, and Tim Scott. So 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans
Excellent.
introduced the bill.
Hey guys, I got to drop off in like 5 minutes just to give that heads up.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me get to my last thing.
Do you want to do a little introduction? We're going to edit this and stuff, but do you want to do a little introduction about who we are? Just 25 words or whatever, so we can put that at the beginning of the thing, or do you want to forget about that? I don't know.
No, man.
No? Okay.
All right. Okay. So my last thing is, and this is what Kim kind of touches upon this, is the fact that Apple and Google partnered up on COVID-19 contact tracing technology. And so now it's going to be on your update. When you update your phone, that you're going to have contact tracing as part of it.
Oh, you see, so you're saying the next time I get like a pushed update for my operating system, my phone, that's going to be it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Geez.
I think we should like have a program. Like we should trade phones for a week just to screw with them.
Yeah. So this is some pretty scary stuff. Only because it's an introduction into further just tracking us constantly. Because they know that we can't live without our phones. Right. So the first implementation, right, is that both companies will release APIs that enable interoperability between Android and iOS devices using apps for public health authorities. These official apps will be available for users to download via their respective app stores.
Right.
So this is them working with these apps at first, right? But then it says, second, in the coming months, Apple and Google will work to enable a broader Bluetooth-based contact tracing platform by building this functionality into the underlying platforms. So eventually, you won't be able to get a phone without this stuff already in there.
I love this. This would allow more individuals to participate. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Apple. And they say that it's an opt-in. So and of course this is at first it's an opt-in.
If they opt in, okay.
Right. And so this is what it will look like, right? So you would have to enable the exposure notifications, right? And then so again, that's enabling. And then share your positive test result. Share your test result and notify others.
Ah, jeez.
Share your random IDs with sample public health authority, which that's great. Have the public health authority. This is when they're going to be knocking on people's doors and being like, oh, so you tested positive, huh? Which I feel like if you test positive, wouldn't they know that already?
You would think you would have tested positive somewhere. Sure, yeah.
Right. And then this is what you would get. This is the notification. Someone you were near has tested positive for COVID-19.
So that's really specific.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
So yeah, so this is just like the first iteration of it, right?
Right. And
which again, it just goes to show that and this is just here in the United States. Obviously, it's they're rolling it out a lot slower than they would in other places, because they know that we're more about our freedoms. But like what Kim talks about is that in the UK, in Germany, in like Taiwan, and a lot of these other places, you have no option. It is mandated.
Right. And they could essentially make this mandated by default by basically doing something like, well, you can't show us at the airport that you have this enabled, because otherwise you don't know if you have COVID or not, because you don't know if you've been exposed, right?
Exactly.
So they absolutely could push it that way,
Exactly. And it's like I said in previous videos that, what's going to happen is that they're going to make it impossible for you to live in this world without integrating into the system. You have to. You won't be able to go to work. You won't be able to go to the stores. You won't be able to, ride in public transportation.
That's right.
You won't be, God forbid, there is definitely no way that you're going to be able to go and fly somewhere. And especially now where they're introducing like these UV light radiation, mandatory at all the airports and shit.
Yeah.
And once you give them that power, they're never going to relinquish it. It's like the Patriot Act, right? There's supposed to be a temporary thing with the sundown.
Oh, of course.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Exactly.
Right. Absolutely.
So on that happy note, are we going to wrap it up now?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Love it.
All
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Have a good week.
Peace.